some of the research actually coming out of academia, but connecting to the real world is, 80% of AI is failing to really take hold inside organizations. And I mean, it's an evolving science. We're trying to understand exactly what it is, but it's, like I said, I think it fits in really nicely with sort of the premise of your show.
Welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we explore how people, process, policy, and technology drive effective change. This is Dr. Darren, Chief Enterprise Architect, educator, author, and most importantly, your host. On this episode, From Ambiguity to Action, Guiding Organizations Through Digital Transformation, with Jason Zimmerman, founder of Threefold Collective. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. And appreciate you. I mentioned this to you before, but I appreciate the platform you're creating and the voice that you're giving to all of us here. And yeah, thanks a lot.
Well, hey, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun doing the show, and I've gone back and watched some of the early episodes. They were super rough. Do not suggest anyone go watch those episodes. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm a little embarrassed, but
No,
not enough to take
since
them
I've
down.
joined.
So
Yeah, no, that's good. Since I've joined, I mean, I love the voice you're creating. And I mean, as a listener myself, I mean, it's a really informative platform. You go from theory to the messiness of the real world and, people, process, technology. And so, yeah, I'm just real happy to join and add to the dialogue.
well, hey, thank you, Jason. And since you're a listener, you know what question comes up next.
It's the question that gives me the most anxiety.
So everyone knows on my show, I only have superheroes. Every superhero has superpowers and a background story. Let's hear your background story first, Jason, then we'll talk about your superpowers.
Yeah, all right, all right. Yeah, so I actually grew up in the world of research, and my whole idea was to actually become a PhD in economics and, sit in front of a classroom and sort of, chase my own questions. And I had an advisor tell me that I should spend a little bit of time in the real world. That way, understanding the messiness of the real world would actually better inform my research. And so I planned on taking a year off. And so I went into a consulting firm where I was doing economic research for government clients. And long story short, 20 years later, I've followed that path deeper and deeper. So I started in economic research. I moved into international M&A consulting, and I spent about a decade or so inside the financial services Fortune 500 firm, where I basically tried to answer the question of how to connect theory and the real world together. And like I said, up top, that messiness is now where I live.
Oh, that's an awesome story. It's interesting because I was gonna use the word academic sellout, but that I won't use that word because you turned it pretty good.
Yeah.
Because I know exactly what you mean. I'm like, yeah, maybe I should teach, and then, oh wow, chase that shiny object, chase that brass ring in Silicon Valley for a while, and
Yeah.
now I'm back teaching though, so I'm
I was gonna say,
enjoying. Yeah,
yeah, you've
yeah,
you've mentioned this
I'm
in.
enjoying that quite a bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say we kind of came at it from the opposite directions, but I think that's part of the voice that is so interesting is how to connect those two worlds of, what is theory, how should it work, and how does it actually work?
And I think that's going to become even more important with generative
Yeah,
AI and how it's embedding itself everywhere.
absolutely.
It has shaken up academia quite a bit
Yeah,
because they're trying to be relevant, and
yeah,
it's a tough situation right now.
yeah. Well, I was gonna say, I mean, it's shaking up the real world as well. It's some of the research actually coming out of academia, but connecting to the real world is, 80% of AI is failing to really take hold inside organizations. And I mean, it's an evolving science. We're trying to understand exactly what it is, but it's, like I said, I think it fits in really nicely with sort of the premise of your show.
Well, and that fits in nicely with what we're going to discuss today, and that's technological change. How in the world do I keep up?
Yeah.
And this is not a unique problem for today. today it sure seems like it's accelerated
Yeah, it
quite
really
quite a
does.
bit, right?
Yeah.
But then I go back and my dissertation was on cybersecurity and and between OT and IT cybersecurity. But a
Sure.
good portion of my stuff was researching previous industrial revolutions, and
Oh,
it was fascinating to go back and look how fast the automotive industry grew. Just
yeah.
boom, changed everything,
Yeah, absolutely.
and we're seeing something very similar today.
Yeah, in some of the writing that I do as well, and some of the conversations I have, I don't use the automobile, but I think that's a good one. I use, the printing press or even calculators in terms of the impact that it had, or even the fear that it created. And it's, from my side, especially, like I said, the intersection of people, process, and technology, AI is evolving so quickly and is creating, just so much ambiguity in terms of, where do humans fit in, that, that fear is really shaping the behaviors that I can see, at least from my seat mouse, within organizations, and how people interact with it.
I'm glad you used the word ambiguity because no one's used that on my show yet, and that's really what
Okay.
I'm seeing as well.
Yeah.
There's I've heard uncertainty, but ambiguity is a lot better word for that because it's so descriptive of what's really going on, and because of that, people are paralyzed. They don't know what
Yes.
to do.
Right. Well, and part of my work, it kind of evolved a little bit more beyond economics, and really into behavioral economics. And so, I mean, that was, economics is, at its heart, it is a social science. But once you start injecting the psychology of it, you start realizing that humans aren't as rational as the mathematics, sort of suggest or tried to make us become. And when individuals lose control, they lose agency, they are shrouded in uncertainty or ambiguity, that's where that resistance really takes place. And, especially for the work that I do at my firm, Threefold Collective, that's the resistance we try to overcome. And so, embracing digital, change, that is what I'm trying to help organizations do. If they want to move into the world of AI or any type of digital space, it's a little bit about that solution, that technology stack, how you want to, or what you want to create, but it's also just as important of how you bring that into existence. And that's where we try to, tackle the ambiguity.
So I love that because it tells me that you're going to learn from all the previous experiences because what we're going through right now has happened before. It's just it
Yeah.
seems like it's faster now and more ambiguous. I love it. Now
Yeah.
I'm going to use that word 5 times in the next 5 minutes.
Good.
Um, but it's so all the stuff that you guys are in a sweet spot to help organizations through this really difficult time of digital transformation that's kind of
Yeah.
hyper change is what's going on. Because I've told organizations, if you don't change, you won't
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah. I mean, it's evolution in that regard, right? And I mean, if you go back around 30 years ago or so, John Cotter out of Harvard started looking at organizational change at scale. And what he found was roughly, 70%, 3 out of 4, transformations would fail. And it wasn't the strategy themselves, right? I mean, developing the strategy is tricky enough to begin with, but it was the implementation of that strategy. And so he kind of came up with 8 rules, or 8 findings that informed that. And summarized, those were really related to human resistance, if we will, right? To the interactions with people. And when you look at that, McKinsey has redone that study, PwC has done that study again in recent times. And this is where we start to get into around 80%. And so when you break around, or break out, if you will, the reason for that increase, why we're getting worse at implementation over the past 30 years, it's because of the speed, the complexity, and AI, I think, just sort of tops them all. And, the fact that 80% failure right now with an AI suggests, you know, maybe we're doing okay, but I think as things ramp up, I think it's going to get even harder.
So do we just give up? Be-
Not at all.
I
Not at
mean,
all.
because 20% success rate,
A 20% success rate.
that's awful.
Yeah.
So why so
Yeah.
why not just close our doors and start a new company? Because it might be easier to just completely start from scratch.
Yeah.
Or what is the success rate of starting from scratch? Do you know
Right.
if they're
That's a good question. I don't know that, to be honest. I'm
uh,
sure it's out there.
sounds like some research we gotta go do, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's something that maybe you and I can partner on later on. But
Yeah.
I will say, I mean, the nimbleness of starting from scratch, right? The ability to ask deeper questions in ways that you maybe wouldn't otherwise if you were a more
And to
established
shed
firm.
off technical debt and to shed off those
Yeah,
albatrosses and not just technical debt, but process debt and organizational
right.
debt, all that. If you could get rid of all that, maybe I could move faster and be more nimble.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, just experience will, anecdotally will tell me, I think you could. The challenge, or if I can argue the other side, is going to be the financial capital to do it. I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, it's a
It's
very
not
expensive endeavor.
feasible, right?
Yeah, precisely, precisely. Well, and that actually brings up a study that just came out of Stanford, a few months ago. I want to say May or June, that is looking at sort of the deeper question of where AI actually begins to implement and is doing it well. And there's a lot of nuance in this study, but it brings up a few different things. One, there is a sweet spot that sort of is the intersection of the capability of AI and the interest of the human themselves and what they want. And the insight there is that it's really about supporting the human. And you then compare that later into the research itself. And you can break a lot of this down into a lot of interesting data points. But most of the implementations today are about replacing humans or not necessarily partnering with humans, but
Which is a
taking
huge
away something
mistake.
that is,
Yeah,
which
that's a
is the
huge mistake.
mistake. Yeah, and that's where I think the behavioral economics lens comes in. Of, it's it, what's the phrase? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, right?
Yeah.
And if there is that resistance, this is what John Cotter found. This is what some of the research recently is finding, that if you don't implement this the right way, culture will resist that change. But the more interesting piece is that there is a place where, I'm going to misquote the numbers, but upwards of 40% of the 1,500 individuals and 100 plus uh, job roles that they looked at, 40% or more want AI to take over some of the more redundant, uh,
Pretty
roles.
substantial.
Yeah, so there is interest, and that's what was so fascinating about this study. It's just we're going about it the wrong way.
All right, so what do I do? If we're going about it the wrong way, which way should I do it? Where do I find success?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you have the answer, right, Jason?
If you're right, no, I do, and yeah, you mean reach out to Threefold Collective to find that
Yeah, there
answer.
you
But
go. Yeah,
if
threefold collective. All your problems solved.
That's right. Um, no, I mean, it is tricky. And when you start to look at the 20% that are successful, I mean, you're swimming with the current, if you will, right? Is you're trying to find where is that sweet spot in your organization, and where are the places that, as we talked about with the automobile or the printing press, it's how can you use AI to elevate the human. And what a lot of people are looking for is, again, getting rid of some of the minutia, the task oriented roles, where the human can focus more on the creative, critical, thought process behind it. And forming that partnership is very difficult. It's proving to be very, very complicated.
Why is it so complicated? Why do you think?
I think it gets back to, and again, this is coming from the behavioral economist in me, but when people lose the agency to make change, or when they, are shrouded in ambiguity, the natural response
Is
is to sit
protectionism.
back and question it.
Yeah.
Right. And, I think a lot of organizations on the whole, when I first speak to them, I asked them the question, how does change take place in your organization? And a lot of senior executives will say up front, they change because I tell them to change, right? They write the
Oh my
paycheck.
goodness.
Yeah. And I mean, they may not be explicit about it, but
Yeah,
that's the
but
sentiment that comes
basically that's what they
across.
say. I've got a carrot
Right.
and I've got a stick. That's basically what
Precisely.
they say.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so some of the things that I've been working on, and we can certainly get into this. I know you're familiar with network analysis, and when you turn that on to, an organization, it's called organizational network analysis. And what it allows us to do is to find where communication patterns are, trust patterns are, influence patterns are, and it allows us to create change not from the top down, but from the bottom up. And one of the stories I was telling you, which may be interesting, is we did a 15,000 person transformation that
That's
we were
amazing.
working with one of the large consulting firms. And they said, an organization that size, it's going to take 10 years to do that using organizational network analysis, but executing this across traditional sort of implementation plans, we were able to do it in 2.5 years. So it's a 4x
It's
increase
incredible.
in moving from point A to point B across this digital transformation, all by flipping the script, trying to make it so that individuals at the bottom regain that control and develop that sort of understanding from the bottom up.
All right. So I love it in theory and practicality. 2.5 years sounds really fast.
Yeah.
Um, Gen AI's not 3 years old yet.
Right. Right.
Crazy, right? So
Yeah.
if I want to make this move even faster, can I? But I guess the question I have even before that is, how long did it take for you to develop the organizational network map? And how do
Yeah.
you go about doing that? Because for computers, it's easy.
Right.
I can have
Right.
a computer just follows things around. I can see where my traffic's talking to each other. With
Yeah.
humans, it's very, very different.
Yeah. So what I like to say is very much like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so is trust, so is influence. Who I find influential may not be who you find influential. And if you take that thread, there's actually two flavors of organizational network analysis. One called passive and another called active. Passive is what AI can actually do for us today. And you might see this in Microsoft Copilot, for instance. And what that's looking at is it's looking at interactions. So it's saying, how are, Darren and Jason connected? We may
How
be on the
often do
exact
they send
same
emails or texts or whatever, right?
email, text, whatever. Right. Exactly. And by looking at that, we can start to, develop the informal network of an organization. And that's going to give us certain clues on, like I said, how does trust, influence, and communication kind of flow throughout the organization. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't yet bring in that sentiment analysis. It doesn't say, well, how does Darren feel about, Jason's email, right? Just because you and I are in the same room or exchanging conversation doesn't mean you trust or respect me. And
Right, right.
if I tell you, hey, we're gonna adopt this technology over here, one of two things is either gonna happen. You're either gonna believe me and trust that what I'm
Or I'm going to drag
saying,
my feet and torpedo
or
you.
you're gonna drag
That's
the
what's
feet.
going to happen.
Right. And so that's where we bring in the active uh, organizational network analysis. And what that allows us to do is get back into that sentiment side. And so it's asking you specifically, how do you feel about these individuals in your organization? And what we're mapping now is the trusting relationships. Depending on the size of the organization, I mean, it's done through surveys, and so it's really just about response times more than anything. We typically let these surveys run for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. But at the end of 2 or 3 weeks, we can run that analysis pretty quickly, find out where the influence centers are. And as I did in this 15,000 person transformation, what we did is we took those individuals and we made a technology academy out of it. And so instead of having the consultant come in and educate, we had a network of 100 plus peers that already had established credibility, already had established trust, that people
Gotcha.
knew to say, I believe in this, and here's what I want to teach you about this thing. And so these peers inside the organization became the adjunct professors, for a lack of a better word. And what we were seeing is that people were more willing to listen and more open to the concepts that we were putting forward.
So it's really interesting because I have this thought when when I go and talk about change. I always talk about change agents, culture keepers,
That's
and
right.
assassins.
Yeah,
Right.
that's it.
And
Yeah.
you have found a way of mapping those three, because I imagine you not only find out who people trust, you also find out in those people that that are trustworthy, I guess it would be the right word, that people
Yeah.
trust. You find out which ones are willing to change, and those are your change agents, and your culture keepers are those that are not willing to change.
Yeah.
And then you got to find the assassins, the ones that will fight every tooth and nail to prevent a change from happening.
Yeah, and this is a personal philosophy of mine, but yes, I mean, at the end of the day, and I'm there's a lot of science behind sort of
Oh yeah, I
what
imagine.
persuasion and influence is. I like to refer to, Dr. Robert Cialdini as an example if anyone wants to look him up. But what we'll try to do is we'll try to triangulate sort of what are the positive factors of change.
Right.
And I will specifically in the reports that I write is I will identify those individuals that can be supportive, and we will keep the individuals who are more resistant anonymized. And we do that intentionally because at the end of the day, we don't know why people are resisting. We don't know their personal motivations behind it. But yes, you can identify it, certainly. But I think, as the economist in me, I want to say, what is the interjection or what is the incentive that we're trying to create? And in this sense, we're always trying to like drive toward the more positive side. And, in our experiments and in the way that we've been seeing it with, organizations, like I said, we can accelerate adoption simply by flipping that script, letting change happen from the bottom up through, the culture keepers, through the, positive change agents.
No, I love the approach, and I never thought to use a network mapping concept to do it, but I think it's brilliant because now you can
Yeah.
start seeing, and you can also measure the impact that
You can
that
measure the impact,
network has.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and in fact, so I'm working with a nonprofit right now where it's a 5,000 person nonprofit, international nonprofit in the educational space. And what we're finding is that there's a lot of centralized power and there's basically productivity loss across the entire network. And so we're using O&A on a more longitudinal type of study. So we're looking at it at various points in time
Over time
to
now.
see how the network changes to become what is currently a more closed network, especially at the more senior level, in running experiments, if you will, to open that network up so that information flows more freely across the organization. And when that happens, that's where you start to find that, you start to not just become more operationally efficient, but when you're trying to make change of any sort, especially around technology or AI, where it's, there is a lot of ambiguity, you can tap into those informal communication networks, very much like social media. I mean, we all know how, things on
Yeah.
social media, sort of, drive change much more quickly and much more deeply than sort of the traditional media outlets, for instance.
So why haven't organizations done this before? I mean, because I would think, hey, if it only makes sense if I can map out how to affect change in my organization through identifying, the people, my change agents and
Yeah.
culture keepers. Why haven't they done this before?
And the simple answer is it's new. network
Yeah.
analysis has been around for
Yeah,
quite
network
some
analysis has been
time.
around for a long time. Yeah.
Right. As yeah, many of your audience members will know, especially in the technology space, cybersecurity, your background, that sort of thing. But applying it to the human network, it started out being called social network analysis and sort of has evolved into organizational network analysis. I mean, it's only a few years out of academia at this point. And, partly why I'm interested in it is my academic research background. And so I will say there's a lot of white space in this area. You're finding a lot of interesting applications from other firms, from other competitors of mine that are sort of creating this
Mhm.
rising tide moment for, the research itself. But when I bet you I've spoken to, let's just say 100 people, and maybe one or two have heard of network analysis and its variant inside the organization and its use cases inside a firm. And so it's just really new. And I don't think a lot of consulting firms are using it. I
Are
don't think a
using
lot
it. Yeah.
of I don't think a
Well,
lot of
it
decision
takes
makers are seeing it.
time too, right? I mean, I'm sending out surveys.
Yeah.
It's not I can come in 2 days to have an answer, which
Right.
a lot of people want that quickly, right? No, it takes time.
Yeah.
I've got to understand your organization. I've got to do surveys. I got to do some behavioral analysis and
Yeah.
of the organization,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a really fair point. It does take time. It's not something that's gonna sort of change on a dime, but when the complexity is large enough, or when the stakes are high enough, worth it. I'll put it this way: it's taken me 3 months, with my nonprofit client when it came to the 15,000 person transformation. I mean, it took us well over a year to really form the right hypothesis about the culture, to study it, and to really begin to start to affect change. And when you break that out, what we're finding is, yeah, 9 to 12 months of sort of analysis, and a lot of executives that are expecting change right away might fall out during that period. But when you look at
Mhm.
a 10-year transformation, we did that effectively in 18 months to really get to our first
That's huge.
stage of success. You're starting to really see the ability to accelerate, the change process.
Well, this also helps us understand why small companies with a smaller organizational network can move so quickly because I can understand
Yeah.
those relationships in that network faster and more deeply than I can in an organization with 15,000 or 150,000,
Yeah. Right.
where those are very complex relationships and those are very complex networks. This is really fascinating.
Well, and if you really break this out, so one of the examples I use all the time is Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works division. I mean, Lockheed Martin, obviously, at the time was a massive organization, but they had this Skunk Works division, which was intentionally segregated off from the rest of the organizational
And
community,
isolated, not just segregated, isolated, right?
almost
No
completely
command
isolated.
control structure. Everything's their own little
Right.
thing with, yeah.
Budgeting was different, the success measures were different, the way that they even interacted with each other, the way that the teams were even designed and created were completely different. The sociologist in me will say, well, that's a closed network versus an open network. And both of those have benefits in different designs. If you go back to my 15,000 person transformation, by creating that technology academy, that's what we did. We ended up creating this small segregated unit,
That's clever.
and by leveraging just the way that news travels, I want to say that formal versus informal communication travels somewhere in the neighborhood of like 4 to 5 times faster than formal communication. It can just
That's
permeate
so
the
true.
organization. And so that's what we're tapping into by isolating this technology academy, which again by design is creating agency. People can go in and study what they want when they want. They had the opportunity to take electives into some of the more advanced technologies, for instance. But it was also closing off that ambiguity, right? It was providing them a deep understanding of why we were doing this. They would then leave that isolated pocket and they would start to tell their friends and their peers about what they were learning. And you would find that people would become more and more interested in it. And so we can see, the rates of, getting into our academy were increasing. In fact, one of the biggest risks we had within this entire project was we didn't have enough capacity inside the academy to meet the demand that we were having. And we had to go back to the board and, in a very positive way, say,
Hey, it's
we actually
working.
need more. Yeah, we need more support. We need more resources to drive this transformation forward. So
So
yeah, it's
it was all voluntary, which is very interesting as well,
yeah,
right? Because that means you're going to do self-selecting. You're going to have people that want to be there. They are the change agents, or they want to make sure they're not left behind. Either one of those two, right?
well, I'll say there is a mix of the two. I mean, for a 15,000 digital transformation, we 100% needed to have sort of what we call the core curriculum, which you'll learn, from all of us going through education. You have to have that core curriculum. So we didn't have an option for that. We did have to stage that out in very structured ways. But once you move past that core, once you sort of understood the technology and the stack and the systems that we were and the processes that we were instilling, uh, you could come in and do electives. And to this day, that system is still up and running. The academy is still operating, and people are coming in and taking more advanced classes, getting certifications. It's sort of went beyond what we anticipated and is really becoming this kind of pull mechanism for individuals to come in and continuously educate themselves, not just on the latest and greatest technology, but how that technology related to that particular firm and that
So
particular culture.
it's almost like an indoctrination to change, right? I mean, because you couch it as training, but what you're training them on is the direction you want them to go. I think it's
Right.
very, very clever. Very,
Yeah.
very,
Right.
very clever.
Well, and I think that's where, like I said, for a lot of the things the topics that you and your other guests and even your listeners are exploring and questioning themselves, it's that intersection of people, process, and technology.
Yeah.
And for me, from the side of the people side, it's like I said, swimming with the current, right? And those things don't live in isolation, but there's this messiness when those things combine that, it's to me, it's about that human resistance to change. How do we make sure, as you said, that the organization evolves, continuously? It has to evolve, especially with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
rate of change.
where it'll perish. And so
Yeah,
and I like the practicality of this. 'Cause it's a design pattern. I use design patterns a lot. It's a design pattern for
absolutely.
organizational change that I can use in any organization because it's a technique that is very, applicable across several different, domains, which I love. Hey, Jason,
Absolutely.
if people wanna find out more about all this or contact you, how do they go
Yeah.
about doing that?
Well, so our website is the number three, but threefoldcollective.com. I also write pretty extensively on Substack about these topics, both in theory and sort of criticizing and dissecting some of the more, uh, more the recent sort of issues that are going on. For instance, you talk about design. Apple is changing its organizational structure, and so on my Substack, you can find sort of a dissection of that, and that is called Threefold Outcomes at Substack.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Jason, thank you for coming on the show. We could talk for hours. I already know
No,
that.
I appreciate it.
So
Yeah,
we may have to have you come back on the show and
definitely.
talk more in depth on, how do I actually go about doing this and more on organizational network analysis, which I think is fascinating. So I
Yeah.
need to be schooled on it. I need to go back to school for it.
Well, I think that's what's so
I'll tell
great
my
too.
wife
It's the
I'll go get another PhD in
Oh
organizational
man,
management.
if I could convince my partner to do the same thing, I think she would leave me, but it would be curiosity is the great
Yeah,
incentive.
she's my wife has already told me we can do that as long as, and then the list is long of things that I need to, take care of first.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
No, I appreciate you having me on it and just giving me a chance to sort of spread this with your audience. And like I said, just engage in the dialogue with you. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation. If you enjoyed today's conversation, give us 5 stars on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube. It really helps others discover the show. If you want to go deeper, join our exclusive community at patreon.com/embracingdigital, where we share bonus content and you can always connect with other change makers like yourself. You can always find more resources at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, keep embracing the digital transformation.